We now present For the Record.
Just ahead, an insider's view of a massive deal cut last week to stave off a UW nurses strike. Plus, the bigger environmental goals behind bow hunting season. And heading into midterm crunch time, an in-depth look at what works and what doesn't on your political yard signs. Welcome to For the Record. I'm Naomi Coles. We have been closely tracking a UW nurses strike that was called off last week. It's the culmination of 3 years worth of effort for union recognition. The deal they struck with UW leadership at the governor's mansion didn't get them that recognition yet, but it laid a path towards legal clarity. I spoke to two nurses who have been leading this charge, that's Mary Jorgensen and Sherry Signer, about how those negotiations went down inside the room where it happened. So, Mary, I think my first question would be for you. Walk me through these 2 days or so late night negotiations. What was that like?
It was exhausting. But some points we were around the table, but we would caucus and UW and their lawyers would go to another room, and then we would come back. They would come back in and we'd talk, and then they'd leave. And it was like that for the almost the whole night. Sunday, our last day, there was much more sitting around a table, hashing things out.
Did the governor provide snacks?
He provided me a Diet Coke because I went in the kitchen and I asked for one. That's how long we were there, that I was comfortable enough to do that.
What was kind of the tenor of conversation sitting around the table, right? So when both parties are there, is it tense? Is it professional, friendly? Like, describe kind of the tone of that.
It is definitely professional. It was friendlier towards the end on Sunday. But just like you said, it was pretty tense. I mean, we had to have a very good game face and not, let your emotions show.
Sherry, I know that you wanted to be, but weren't able to be at these meetings because of work. I mean, what was your feelings? I imagine you were probably getting text or some kind of communication as this is happening. And once this agreement all kind of rolls out, what was your initial reaction? Were you completely happy? I mean, obviously there's some things that weren't included in this deal that nurses were pushing for initially.
Yeah, it was very stressful to be sitting on the sidelines waiting. I honestly have to say I had no idea how long that this negotiations would last. So there were times that I thought they must have been done and they were just typing things up and they were still, in the meetings. Initial reactions, I was not overly happy on the initial reaction, but that's also because I didn't fully understand everything, what everything meant. We are nurses. I don't know labor laws like the SEIU group does. And so once I got to actually hear rationales and listen to the points and why things are the way they are, it made a lot more sense. And I'm very, very happy with the outcome. This was exactly what we were going for at this point. So, we really are excited about the outcome of the meetings.
Did a lot of nurses, and this is for either of you, but did a lot of nurses react that way in terms of initially like, hey, this isn't what we wanted, and then kind of they got the explanation, they kind of got on board?
Yeah, there was a lot of confusion, and I think there still is. I think people expected us to come out with complete union recognition, more money, just immediate changes, and it's not like that. But honestly, we got everything that we asked for.
Well, yeah. If I could actually push on that, I mean, one of the key, Sherry and I we talked about this in multiple interviews leading up to, the strike that was going to happen. But one of the key things here was to get union recognition, which obviously has not happened here. How long did it take for nurses to relinquish that in the agreement? What did it take to get there?
Well, we haven't. We've agreed to go jointly to the Wisconsin Employer Recognition Committee.
Commission.
So once we go to work and seek to see if we are available and able to have protection under the Peace Act, then we can actually call it recognition. So that was a piece that I personally didn't realize, that the hospital has agreed to have the union in the hospital, but we just can't use that talking point of getting voluntary recognition until it is decided by work.
And once it's decided by work, we will have full collective bargaining rights. So it's a pretty historic time.
But let me ask you the other $1 million question, right? Because after work inevitably comes the Supreme Court, which UW has been clear that if work recognizes, they'll appeal it up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, particularly if they kind of fast track this under the current makeup of the court before next spring's elections. How confident are you that you'll win there?
I feel pretty good about that aspect of it. Nurses are very, very popular right now with the community, and there are those elections coming up. So I do think if Supreme Court ruled against us, that it would not go over in the community very well, and that could show up in the elections.
Well, and the hospital has already agreed to follow with the agreement with work there at the table. So the nurses have a union in the hospital, and the hospital has stated that they will honor that agreement and they will sit down with nurses. And the strength that we have in the unity of the numbers and the community, and the amount of nurses that have joined on to this, I do feel strong that, they will still sit down and have a seat at the table.
Let me ask you about another kind of core requirement that nurses were initially looking for, and that was for UW to not retaliate against nurses who, were taking part in these efforts, particularly the reinstatement of that one nurse that I believe was terminated. Has UW come to the table on any of that? Do you have any kind of securement of promises that retaliation won't become a thing?
Yes, that was one of our agreements. They did reinstate the nurse who was fired. And we have an expedited path to have peer support during disciplinary meetings. And they said that we have the right to organize within the hospital, and we will not be retaliated against for that.
How long does it take during these meetings to get there, right? Are you giving up something in order to get that the lack of retaliation? Describe kind of that give and take.
Yeah, there's some give and take. We did give up the right to strike for voluntary recognition until all of this, the courts are settled and all the legal issues are dealt with. Gotcha. And this agreement is until September of 2025.
What happens if the Supreme Court ultimately rules against the union? Do you foresee returning to something like a strike, or kind of where would you go from there?
At this point, I think we're going to focus on our steps that we need to take right now to just get everything up and going with the union being in the hospital. There's a lot of education that we need to continue providing to the nurses to explain exactly what we did when, and looking at the next steps so that way the hospital knows how serious we are about keeping this going, and just educating the nurses on labor law.
And educating the hospital too.
Yes.
Dr. Kaplan said, I really don't know how this works at all. So we also won the right to have union dues taken out of our payroll. So we had to explain that process. So it's going to be a new experience for everybody in that building.
All right, well, that's all I have for you. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes. So from UW Health side, here's where that agreement landed. UW and the nurses will jointly petition the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission for a ruling. Then either party can appeal that ruling to the state Supreme Court. In the meantime, in exchange for a promise not to strike, UW will engage in open discussions with union nurses, which they referenced in the interview. And now coming up next on For the Record, a former News 3 Now meteorologist makes her return to the airwaves.